Welcome back, everyone. This is the second lecture on jurisdiction of courts. We are diving into material or subject matter jurisdiction. Material or subject matter jurisdiction refers to the power of a particular court of a state to determine the type or kind of a dispute involved in a case. It involves three main issues, the first being whether the subject matter falls outside the judicial power of ordinary courts, differentiating these cases from those dealt with by other tribunals. Next, we examine which court system has jurisdiction, determining whether state or federal courts are appropriate, and which level of courts has jurisdiction, which identifies the competent vertical structure to hear a lawsuit. Let's explore these aspects one by one. Regular courts have judicial power to decide cases in accordance with the law, but this power is limited to justiciable matters. Everyone has the right to bring a justiciable matter before a competent body, and courts are generally restricted to trying civil suits unless their jurisdiction is expressly or impliedly barred. Justiciable matters can be broadly defined as inclusive of all cases, unless the law provides otherwise. This includes all civil matters, except those explicitly delegated by law to other organs, such as those referenced in specific case law. Some issues are identified by law to be treated by tribunals with delegated quasi-judicial power. If a case is assigned to such an agency outside the ordinary judicial structure, the court will lack material jurisdiction and cannot render a valid decision. Examples include the Privatization Agency and the Tax Appeal Commission. Case law, such as Volume 6, Case number 30,704, clarifies that certain petitions regarding expropriated property fall under the jurisdiction of the Ethiopian Privatization Agency. The court does not have the authority to decide on such administrative matters, as established by relevant proclamations. These tribunals exercise delegated power over administrative activities. While an appeal to a regular court is allowed, particularly on issues of law, a party cannot file directly to a regular court without first exhausting all available remedies within the administrative system. Other matters potentially outside the scope of regular courts include certain family matters involving Muslims, as handled by Sharia courts, and disputes settled by arbitration or compromise. Furthermore, some political or administrative matters are considered non-justiciable. Determining competence between federal and regional courts involves looking at the power-sharing method of the Constitution. This approach exhaustively lists the exclusive powers of the federal government and leaves residual powers to the regional governments. While the Constitution demarcates federal and regional spheres, the broad definitions can make it difficult to specify exactly what constitutes a federal or regional matter, necessitating alternative methods for determining court power. A second approach is based on the Federal Courts Proclamation No. 1234/2021, which provides general principles and lists of cases falling under federal jurisdiction. These are categorized by the law, the status of the parties, the location of the case, and the nature of the suit. If a case is based on federal law, the Constitution, or international treaties, it falls under federal court jurisdiction. Additionally, federal courts have the power to interpret the Constitution, including cases involving the enforcement of human rights provisions. Regarding the status of parties, federal courts have jurisdiction over cases involving foreign diplomats, international organizations, or federal government organs. Jurisdiction also extends to disputes between parties residing in different regions, or between regions and major cities like Addis Ababa or Dire Dawa. Federal courts also hear cases involving the liability of federal officials in the course of their duties, cases where foreigners are parties, and matters involving business organizations registered with federal government organs. Finally, regarding the place where a case arose, disputes originating in Addis Ababa or Dire Dawa generally fall under the competence of federal courts, as specified by the Constitution and federal law. The fourth category for determining federal jurisdiction is the nature of the suit itself. This includes specific matters such as private international law, enforcement of foreign judgments, nationality issues, bankruptcy, federal property, and negotiable instruments. Other specific categories for federal suit types include matters related to patents and artistic ownership rights, insurance policies, and habeas corpus applications. These defined areas help distinguish federal subject matter from state-governed disputes. It is important to note that while claims based on state law typically fall under the jurisdiction of state courts, these courts also have jurisdiction over federal law matters occurring within their territory, provided such cases are not under the exclusive jurisdiction of federal courts. There are exceptions where state law cases are regarded as federal subject matter. Jurisdictional bases, as outlined in Articles 3, 1a, and b, may focus on the issue of litigation or the identity of the parties, rather than just the law being applied. Federal courts have jurisdiction not only when federal laws are involved, but also when specified parties under Article 5 are involved in the suit. Cases are categorized as state cases if they arise under state law and do not meet the criteria for federal jurisdiction. Notably, federal cases occurring within state territory may fall under the delegated jurisdiction of state courts. In these instances, federal courts lack jurisdiction, and the parties generally do not have the right to choose the forum. Federal courts have jurisdiction over cases arising from federal laws or issues between specific parties defined in federal law. While state subject matter is based on state law, there are conditions where these cases are handled by federal courts through delegation. However, Article 5(2) of the Federal Courts Proclamation provides an exception. Regional matters generally remain with regional courts, even if a party mentioned in specific subarticles intervenes in the proceedings or after judgment. Once a case is determined to be federal or state subject matter, the next step is identifying the appropriate level of court. This vertical division of jurisdiction helps determine whether the suit belongs in a first instance, high, or Supreme Court. The principle for identifying the correct court is found in Article 12(1) of the Civil Procedure Code. Every suit should be tried by the lowest grade court competent to hear it, unless otherwise provided by law. This rule ensures that higher grade courts are not overburdened and that the process is convenient for both parties and witnesses. Vertical division of jurisdiction allocates judicial business based on the amount of money involved or the complexity of the case. Material jurisdiction is governed by the Civil Procedure Code, the Federal Courts Proclamation, and various regional courts establishment proclamations. We must understand these rules to correctly identify the hierarchy of courts for any given case. Pecuniary jurisdiction, established in Article 16 of the Civil Procedure Code, determines that a court's competence depends on the value of the suit at the time of its institution. The amount of money in controversy determines where a case should be filed. Federal courts have specific pecuniary limits. For instance, the Federal High Court generally handles cases exceeding 10 million birr, while the Federal First Instance Court handles cases not exceeding 10 million birr as per current proclamations. State court jurisdictions are determined by their own establishment proclamations rather than the old Civil Procedure Code provisions. For example, Oromia regional courts in other states have their own specific monetary thresholds for different levels of their judicial hierarchy. To determine the amount in controversy, one must refer Articles 16 and 17 of the Civil Procedure Code. Basically, the amount of money a case involves is gathered from the statement of claim of the plaintiff. Art 16(2) of the 1965 CPC provide that, in deciding whether it has pecuniary jurisdiction, the court shall have regard to the amount of claims stated in the statement of claim. Arts 226 to 228 of the Civil Procedure Code governs the amount to be stated in the statement of claim. We now turn to exclusive jurisdiction. Unlike monetary-based limits, this determines which court must hear a case based on its complexity or sensitive nature, regardless of the amount of money involved. To identify exclusive jurisdiction, we must consult the federal and state court proclamations, along with the Civil Procedure Code. These define the types of cases reserved for specific courts due to their nature. At the federal level, the Federal High Court has exclusive first-instance jurisdiction over matters such as private international law, enforcement of foreign judgments, nationality cases, bankruptcy, and cases involving diplomatic immunity. The Federal High Court is also empowered to handle applications for changes of venue and matters involving the protection of justiciable human rights as specified in the Constitution. Regional states similarly define exclusive jurisdiction through their respective court establishment proclamations. For example, laws in Amhara, Oromia, and other regions designate specific courts for matters like cooperative organizations or regional entities. Under the Civil Procedure Code, exclusive jurisdiction covers areas like corporate dissolution, maritime law, insurance policies, intellectual property, and habeas corpus, though some of these have been superseded by newer proclamations. The jurisdictional landscape remains complex, particularly regarding habeas corpus, where interpretations vary between federal and regional laws. Practitioners must navigate these conflicting provisions carefully. Finally, remember that filing a claim in a court lacking material jurisdiction leads to rejection. Courts are required to identify and address jurisdictional defects, even if parties do not raise an objection. Thank you. In the next video, we will discuss local jurisdiction. Stay tuned, and please like and subscribe for more civil procedure lessons.